Oh howdy, welcome to the first annual third-party cooking show where we never disappoint. Just ask one of our valued customers.
Delicious.
Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the third-party cooking show where we throw games into a boiling pot to ensure the best possible quality. We got games like Dark Souls 2, Ghostbusters the video game. Oh, every pot needs its terrible. Yeah, the cops shut me down for air pollution, so I guess I'll just have to find another way to talk about third parties. Third-party games. So what's the difference between both third-party and first-party support? First-party support is a game developed by a studio owned by that particular company, such as Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony. And a good example of this is Naughty Dog, who develops the Uncharted series. And unless Sony parts with them, they will never create games for any other hardware but Sony hardware. And then third-party support is a company that develops games for one of those consoles without any specific contract to one of those said companies. I think it's important to understand that companies making a games console need both first-party and third-party support to be successful. And to demonstrate this point, I will create a fake unbalance using Microsoft as my guinea pig. Microsoft's Gears of War series is a great first-party game, but the average fan also wants to play Call of Duty. But Activision makes the decision that it's too hard to port Call of Duty to Xbox, and announces that it's only coming to Sony and Nintendo's consoles. Also, Sony and Nintendo both have amazing first-party support as well. Sony with the Uncharted series, and Nintendo with games like Zelda. That means the average consumer will see all these amazing first-party titles on these consoles on top of third-party games like Call of Duty, giving Sony and Nintendo the edge over Microsoft. Too bad I pulled a switcheroo on you. Nintendo's the real victim here. Oh yeah, can you be the victim if you put it on yourself? Let me check. Nintendo started strong with third-party support with their first mainstream console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then with their second console, the Super Nintendo. Also known as the NES, released in late 1985, and the SNES, released in 1991. The NES had great third-party support with games like Ghosts and Goblins and Ninja Gaiden, then the SNES with games like Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana. These are just a few examples of awesome third-party support on these consoles, but this would come to an end for the years to come. Nintendo's next console would hold some of the best games of all time. That console is the N64. Games like Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, and so many others are some of the best experiences you can have in gaming. But this would be one of the first instances of lacking third-party support. One of the biggest reasons for lacking third-party support is this. Due to the fact that the N64 is a cartridge-based console, it suffered compared to disc-based consoles at the time, such as the PlayStation 1, also known as the PS1. A great example of this is Resident Evil 2. The PS1 version released in 1998 to great success, but one thing that was different compared to most PS1 games is that it came on 2 discs. A standard PS1 disc contained 700 megabytes, and apparently that wasn't enough for Resident Evil 2. Yeah, well that was a lie. The N64 version of Resident Evil 2 was compressed into a 64 megabyte cartridge. This is what I like to call a hat trick. So how is this even possible? Well, for starters, everything was downgraded, such as the graphics and resolution, as well as other things such as lowering the frame rate of cutscenes from 30 FPS to 15 FPS. The company responsible for porting Resident Evil 2 to the N64 is Angel Studios, and in doing so would prove why the N64 didn't receive that many third-party games. It was extremely time-consuming, and the thought of compressing a game that came on 2 700 megabyte discs down to a 64 megabyte cartridge wasn't that compelling to developers. And on top of that, the PS1 outsold the N64 by nearly 70 million units, making it even less compelling to port over games to the N64. So you think Nintendo would learn their lesson and do everything possible to support third parties? Nope. After the N64, we would see the Nintendo GameCube, which is yet again another awesome console. It sat right in the middle of the 6th generation of consoles as far as power was concerned, which meant the Nintendo GameCube could have all the third-party support it wanted. Then Nintendo did a little thing I like to call being Nintendo. The GameCube's Achilles heel was its optical format. The mini DVD, which was definitely a step in the right direction. A very small step. See, the problem with this is that one disc only held roughly 1.5 gigabytes of storage compared to its competitors' full-size discs holding roughly 8 gigabytes of storage.
Basically, what happened to the N64 is what happened to the GameCube.
Developers would have to compress their games to fit on a mini DVD, and even though it was a vast improvement over the 64 megabytes in an N64 cartridge, it was still considerably less compared to its competitors, the PS2 and Xbox. This doesn't mean all developers shied away from the GameCube, thank God, because Fate could have skipped out on the best game of all time. The way Capcom pulled off this beauty is by putting it on 2 discs.
This is how a lot of companies got around the 1.5 gigabyte limit, but with 2 discs, that's still only 3 gigabytes compared to other consoles, roughly 8 gigabytes on 1 disc.
But Fate and the stars would align, and Nintendo would release a console that had full-size discs. Jesus, Nintendo, you were so close. I do love the Wii. It was home to great games like Mario Galaxy and so many others, but as far as third-party support goes,
it was the opposite of good. It was bad.
The Wii was relative to the GameCube in power and was basically like if the GameCube took steroids, did pull-ups for a month, and started walking around with his disc tray open.
So yes, it wasn't the optical format holding back the console, it was the console itself. For the love of God, Nintendo.
At this time, both Sony and Microsoft were pushing their next-gen consoles, the Xbox 360 and PS3. Both had new and exciting HD gameplay, better graphics, and games that took advantage of this power like Halo 3 and Uncharted. But the Wii would strike back with a little itty-bitty game called Wii Sports. I mean, come on, I can't bowl my Wii remote into my TV in Halo 3.
Oh yes, the Wii also sold over 100 million units. Should I have led with that?
The Wii sold over 100 million units, which is amazing, and out of the PS3 and 360, it would be first in terms of sales. But does it truly count when you're a dust collector? I mean, I can't imagine the countless people that were dusting and opened up their entertainment system and said, "Oh shit, there's a Wii in there?" The Wii's main gimmick was motion controls, and after people figured out that the motion controls were primitive and you could just sit down to bowl, TVs around the world took a sigh of relief. But that's not to say it was all mediocre. The Wii did sell over 100 million units after all. But that wasn't it. The Wii also saw a port of the best game of all time.
Oh, thank God.
So, to sum it up, the Wii had lacking hardware compared to its competition and also lacked HDMI support, only supporting AV and component cables. Which meant instead of the issue being compressing the games to fit on a Wii's discs, developers would instead have to downgrade their games graphically and in other areas to get the game to run on Wii, and for most developers, it wasn't worth the time and money to port their games onto the Wii. Well, except for Activision.
I mean, come on, how else am I gonna play Call of Duty Black Ops on Wii?
Okay, so what console could be next? Oh yeah, the Wii U! This will be one of the first times that I don't know where to start, because the Wii U had a lot more problems than just lacking hardware or mini DVDs. Well, one of those things was true. The Wii U released in late 2012, roughly 1 year before its competitors, the Xbox One and PS4. The Wii U was a big upgrade for Nintendo, now supporting HD graphics, and at the time was Nintendo's most powerful console. But wow, was it still underpowered as hell. But this isn't the worst of the Wii U's problems, because it did have third-party support at first from companies like EA and Ubisoft, with games like Watch Dogs and Mass Effect 3, but therein lies the problem with Wii U third-party support. It was half-assed. Mass Effect 3 was the third game in a trilogy of games, and the first 2 weren't even on Nintendo-branded consoles. On top of that, Mass Effect 3 released on March 6, 2012, which means it couldn't release at the same time as the 360 and PS3 versions because the Wii U didn't even exist yet. Plus, in 2012, you could buy a 360 during the holiday season with Forza 4 and Skyrim. And if you were really looking to buy into the Mass Effect series, you could buy 1, 2, and 3 and have the ability to play all 3 games on one console. On top of that, the cheapest Wii U was $300 at the time. Okay, so what's the issue with playing Watch Dogs on Wii U? Playing it on this console doesn't seem bad, the frame rate is good and the game looks fine enough, but Watch Dogs originally released in May of 2014 for the PS3, 360, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Well, I don't see the Wii U version in there. Well, that's because it released in November. That means Watch Dogs suffers from the same issues Mass Effect 3 did. Why would the average consumer buy this version if you could buy a 360 for cheaper, or hell, even save up your money for a PS4 or Xbox One?
This wasn't the Wii U's only problem, no siree, it also suffered from terrible marketing.
At first, I saw some of these commercials and thought, hey, they aren't that bad, but then I saw the Yoshi's Woolly World commercial, and it's just...
Tapping a Yarn Yoshi amiibo? Whoshi! It's a double Yoshi Exploshi! Yoshi's Woolly World Special Amiibo.
Well, it's something. Everything seems to be aimed towards families, and that's fine if Nintendo had a few commercials like this, but they're all like this. Everything's aimed towards kids, and in the end, this wouldn't bring in the hardcore audience, and by this, I mean the people that want to play games like Watch Dogs or hell, even Call of Duty aren't going to be appealed to the console if you don't advertise that part of the console. I looked for Nintendo branded commercials that push these mature games, and I can't even find one, and heck, even if there is one isn't enough to persuade this demographic of people that want to play mature rated games.
Yes, these commercials are bad, but then I saw the Smash Brothers for Wii U commercial, and how did it get worse?
This commercial's main gimmick is that you can use amiibos, which are plastic figures with special access to content that is specific to that amiibo, on that specific amiibo. So, what is the special feature this commercial showed off?
That you could use the amiibo to select a character.
You know, that feature you can do by moving your cursor onto the character and pressing A. Well, to be fair, that's not it. The amiibo's true feature is actually pretty cool. In the case of Smash Bros. For Wii U, you can scan an amiibo and upgrade that specific character's stats from level 1, upgrading stats such as attack and speed. But this commercial does a dreadful job at explaining this feature. To me personally, all this commercial conveys is that you need an amiibo to select a character in Smash Bros, meaning it's required to play the game when it's not, and if this is the case, it makes it even more obvious why people didn't want this console.
The Wii U's advertising was a confusing mess, but what does this have to do with third parties?
Well, bad hardware combined with confusing marketing on top of Nintendo's first-party offerings being lackluster to say the least. Starting strong with games like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD and towards the end fizzling out with games like Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. And all of this added up to the Wii U selling 13 million units in its lifetime. This means third-party developers would see bad console sales on top of third-party offerings like Watch Dogs selling poorly, which would ultimately lead to developers not wasting time and money on a Wii U port of their game.
Okay, but how would Nintendo turn the losing streak around? With this hunk of plastic, of course.
But first, I must ask the age-old question, is Resident Evil 4 on it? Take my money! The Nintendo Switch would finally switch the narrative in early 2017 with truly amazing experiences like Breath of the Wild and later that year, Super Mario Odyssey. But what makes this exceed expectations even further? Well, you can do this! The Nintendo Switch is a hybrid console that can switch back and forth between playing on a TV and playing portably. And on top of that, the Switch was just powerful enough compared to the base PS4 and Xbox One, and Nintendo would finally receive constant third-party support.
It's also sold over 80 million units. I figured that's also pretty important.
So, finally, Nintendo's hardware is powerful enough to receive third-party games like Metro 2033, Doom Eternal, Payday 2, and so many others, finally creating the balance between first-party and third-party offerings on a Nintendo console.
And yeah, that'd be pretty much all I have to say about the Nintendo Switch, but I want to do something extra. I want to take a look at 3 third-party games I'd love to see on Switch. Now, this won't be anything comprehensive or anything. I'm just looking on my shelf and going, hey, that'd be pretty neat to see on Switch.
Plus, I want to keep these games to the 7th generation of consoles and below just to ensure that it's possible to work on Switch, and first, I'd like to start with Fear. So, I'm extremely new to this game, but it seems awesome and I feel like a Switch port would do it justice. Maybe some updated graphics with an ability to toggle back and forth between a new style and old style, like in the remaster of Halo. Also, the back of the box claims to have 16-player multiplayer, and that would be amazing to see, but if it was to be bare bones, just bring back the campaign. So, are you ever in the dark with a flashlight and an Energizer ad? Well, you're playing Alan Wake! Originally, Alan Wake was a Microsoft exclusive released in 2010, and I feel like it got stuck in the shadow of the Kinect. Alan Wake is a thriller game where you go on vacation with your wife, she gets kidnapped, and then you gotta fight off the Taken by flashing your light in their eyes until you're given the option to shoot them.
Thank God for the Energizer Bunny.
Sadly, Microsoft was busy pushing the Kinect, and I feel like it left this game in the dust. Plus, I don't really hear people talking about this game anymore, and I would love to see a revival of it if possible.
So with one game remaining, what could it possibly be? It's Resident Evil 4, of course.
Yes, Capcom has already ported this game to the Switch, but I think it would be cool to see a combo pack with a playable version of the GameCube preview disc. Yes, I clearly understand this is a pipe dream, but Resident Evil 4 is one of Capcom's best games of all time, and it would be cool to see a release of this game with a cool piece of history. And considering Resident Evil 4 started out as a GameCube exclusive, it would be a pretty cool thank you to the fans.
So those are 3 games I'd love to see on Switch, but now that my cooking show is shut down, how do I advertise them? I know! Buy my shit.